Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're going to tell the tale of an emperor so powerful, so utterly obsessed with control, that he banned pants across his entire empire, and then spent his free time designing giant kites, big enough to carry a full-grown person into the sky. You're standing on a marble balcony high above the imperial city. The wind brushes softly through your sleeves, the scent of jasmine and incense in the air. Behind you, red silk curtains ripple in the doorway. In front of you stands a man in flowing gold robes that barely reach his knees. No pants. None. This is Emperor Wu of Northern Zhou, and he's about to change your life, or at least your wardrobe. You might be surprised to hear this story. It sounds made up. A guy who hated pants and loved building flying machines 2 centuries before Leonardo da Vinci even doodled a helicopter? But that's history for you, stranger than fiction, and sometimes weirder than your dreams after eating expired cheese. So before you get cozy and drift off to sleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to support us. Now, turn off the lights, close your eyes, relax your body, focus on the story, and enjoy the ride tonight. You shuffle closer to the emperor, careful not to trip on the embroidered dragon tapestry underfoot. Wu turns to you, his eyes narrow and distant, as if they're watching something invisible hover far above the horizon. "No more pants," he whispers, almost reverently. And with that, you're swept into the middle of a historical fever dream. Emperor Wu, born Yuan Yang, ruled in the 6th century CE, during a chaotic time in Chinese history called the Northern and Southern Dynasties period. It was the era of fracturing kingdoms, philosophical bickering, and incredibly complex hairdos. Wu, ascending to power at the ripe age of 16, had big plans for his empire. Conquest? Sure. Reform? Definitely. But first, a fashion statement. He'd grown up watching rival states wear tight-fitting trousers, symbols, in his eyes, of barbarian influence. The Northern Qi, in particular, favored military-style pants, ideal for horseback riding, ambushes, and probably squats. Wu wanted none of that. He saw robes as more refined, more elegant, more floaty. Robes were timeless. Pants were, according to his official proclamation, an obscenity against the natural breath of the earth. Yeah, he actually said that. From then on, no one at court was allowed to wear pants. Not generals, not ministers, not even the stable boys. Long tunics, flowing skirts, and wide ceremonial sashes replaced leg coverings throughout the capital. The ban became law. Official state records noted violations like some sort of imperial fashion police blotter. One minor official tried to sneak into court wearing riding breeches under his robe. Wu had him write an apology poem with his feet. At first, people were confused. Then they got cold. But eventually, the new, robe-only fashion became a kind of floating elegance in the court, a surreal parade of cloth that looked like it was constantly caught in a breeze, even when there wasn't one. The emperor himself favored short robes with ornate embroidery, phoenixes, dragons, cranes mid-flight, and sandals, always sandals. His legs were tanned from sunlight and court gossip. Some whispered he wore secret silk shorts underneath. Others believed his thighs had divine protection. Now, Wu wasn't completely irrational. He didn't outlaw pants for peasants or farmers. After all, try harvesting rice in a silk tunic and nothing else. It's not practical. But in the halls of power, in the sacred heart of his capital, robes only, no exceptions. You trail behind him through a towering corridor of jade pillars. Palace guards bow as he passes. Their bare knees are knobbly and suspiciously sunburned. You wonder what happens if someone sneezes and accidentally exposes more leg than permitted. A citation? A stern letter? Wu's obsession with controlling the court's appearance wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about dominance over fashion, tradition, and even the body itself. By outlawing pants, he set himself apart not just from rival kingdoms, but from previous emperors, Confucian norms, and common sense. Let them ride horses in shame, he once said about the northern Qi. Our people shall fly. That wasn't metaphor. Wu had another, even stranger passion: kites, enormous ones. Ones shaped like birds, bats, even people. But that's for later. Right now, you're just soaking in the vibe of a palace where silk rustles louder than footsteps, and every conversation sounds like it's one word away from being a poem. A court musician walks by, dragging a stringed instrument larger than he is. His robe has a pattern of clouds. He's humming. Do you think this is strange? Wu suddenly asks you, turning back with a slight smile. You'll see. The future is in the air. You nod slowly, pretending to understand. But deep down, a question floats through your mind like a loose thread on a very fancy tunic. Was this man a visionary? Or just very, very bored? Historians are still debating whether Wu's anti-pants decree was political posturing or a spiritual gesture. Some say it was symbolic resistance to nomadic military styles. Others think he just wanted everyone to look like they were floating. Whatever the reason, the no-pants empire was born, and you're now an official observer of its robe-covered rise. A breeze picks up as you step back out onto the balcony. In the sky above, something enormous flutters behind the sun. Some kind of flying shape, strange and majestic. But that comes later. For now, you stand beside the emperor and his wind-kissed knees, staring off into the distance, your bare legs tingling in the cool twilight. You wake up with silk in your mouth. Not literal silk. You didn't eat your pillow again. It's just everywhere. Draped over balconies, trailing from ceiling beams used as napkins and bandages and decorations for even the horse's hooves. You've spent a whole week in Emperor Wu's court now, and if there's one thing you've learned, it's this. You don't question the robes, but you do question the lack of pants. A lot. Today, you shuffle barefoot through the Palace of Clear Harmony, which, ironically, is where most of the arguments happen. Ministers are gathered like flamingos in a pond, flapping their wide sleeves and avoiding eye contact with each other's knees. Wu sits above them on a lacquered throne, watching, listening, plotting the future of fashion like it's a military campaign. Foreigners, he finally mutters. They brought the pants. Everyone stiffens. You try to fade into the shadows of a decorative crane statue, but Wu's eyes flick toward you. You, yes, you. Tell me what you know about the Northern Qi. You know, not a lot, but you nod wisely, as if the very thought of Qi trousers offends your soul. Wu's hatred for pants wasn't random. No, he blamed them on the rival dynasty across the Yellow River. The Northern Qi loved military-style uniforms, tunics over tight-fitting pants, perfect for cavalry charges and battlefield pirouettes. In Wu's eyes, these were not just garments, they were symbols of corruption, of foreignness, of barbarity. See, China's borders were slippery back then. Dynasties rose and fell faster than you can say silk tax exemption, and many rulers came from non-Han backgrounds. The Northern Zhou, Wu's own clan, had Xianbei ancestry, a nomadic people known for horse riding, archery, and ironically, pants. Lots of pants. Leather ones, with fringe. Wu wanted to distance his regime from that heritage. He wanted robes, flowing, untainted, long-sleeved dignity. So he rebranded the court's wardrobe, starting with himself. You hear it in the new proclamations. Let not the wind be trapped by bifurcation. That's a fancy way of saying down with pant legs. Bureaucrats were issued robe measurements. Tailors were hired by imperial decree. The Department of Robe Affairs suddenly became a real thing. Historians are still debating whether this was satire or just very committed bureaucracy. But Wu didn't stop there. He began composing public critiques of pant-wearing generals. His trousers were stiff, he wrote of one, and so was his judgment. Cold, real cold. He even ordered frescoes to be painted in the palace, showing legendary heroes of China's past, but all with majestic robes, even those who historically wore armor. One poor painter tried to argue that General Fan Kuai would never have fought in a dress. The next day, he was reassigned to the Imperial kite-folding squad. We'll get to them later. You wander past one of those frescoes now. It's glorious. A 10-foot mural of ancient warriors dramatically lifting swords in the air, their robes fluttering like dramatic curtains on a stage. In reality, they probably wore tunics and pants. But in Wu's imagination, everyone was in a fashion show. This obsession wasn't without its consequences. Military readiness took a hit. Robes, it turns out, aren't ideal for galloping into battle. One commander tripped over his hem while dismounting and had to be rescued by a confused stable hand. The court politely ignored it. Later, the incident was reclassified as an intentional display of martial humility. Of course, Wu had enemies, especially among those who liked their knees covered. An anonymous pamphlet appeared one morning under palace doors. It was called In Defense of Divided Cloth. Very dramatic. The writer praised the practicality of pants and suggested that maybe, just maybe, Wu was overreacting. The emperor read it once, folded it precisely 8 times, and fed it to his pet crane. No vision, he said, no air. He wasn't entirely alone in his fashion crusade. Some poets and scholars jumped on board, eager to gain favor. They began composing odes to the robe. O flowing silk, you make my soul cascade, while pants confine like iron, tightly laid. One even claimed that wearing robes allowed thoughts to drip more elegantly through the brain. That scholar was later promoted. Still, resistance simmered beneath the seams. Not everyone appreciated being forcibly breezy. Tailors had to retrain. Old trousers were burned in ceremonial bonfires. The price of robes surged, and black market pant dealers emerged in rural towns. Some peasants traded eggs for leggings in hushed corners of the village square. You think you see one now? A servant scuttling through the palace gardens with something suspiciously folded under her tray. Could it be trousers? Maybe, maybe not. You don't ask. You've learned by now, in Wu's empire, you don't talk about pants. Instead, you follow the emperor to the Hall of Wind, where an enormous kite sits in the center like a sleeping dragon. It's made of silk and bamboo and ambition. Wu walks around it, inspecting the seams. This, he says softly, this is the future, not bound to the earth by cloth tubes. You nod again. You're not sure if he's talking about fashion or flight, but either way, it sounds epic. By now, you've accepted the no pants policy. You've even started to enjoy the freedom, the way the robes swish when you walk, like you're constantly sweeping the ground with dignity. You haven't worn anything with legs in a week, and your thighs have never felt so liberated. Still, a question tickles the back of your mind. Was all this truly about identity and philosophy? Or was it just one man's very dramatic way of saying, I don't like the way that looks? Historians are still debating whether Wu's vendetta against pants was an act of deep cultural defiance, or just a petty, breezy power trip. But in this moment, watching the emperor gesture at a kite shaped like a phoenix, while his ministers nervously hold their sleeves down to cover more thigh. One thing is certain, there are no boring days in a court where pants are illegal. The wind picks up again, brushing your cheek like a curious cat. You're standing in the middle of what used to be the Royal Polo Field. But now, It's been transformed into something much more experimental. Ahead of you, silk ripples in every direction. Giant wooden spools creak under pressure. And tied to a rope the size of your leg is a kite. No, a beast of a kite. 30 feet across, shaped like a swooping hawk, with fabric wings so wide they cast shade on the imperial parasols. This is not child's play. This is kite time. Emperor Wu, standing nearby with wind-swept hair and no pants, as always, beams with boyish excitement. His officials stand stiffly in their very long, very swishy robes, pretending this isn't incredibly weird. You do your best to blend in, trying not to look like you're rethinking every life choice that's led to standing in a field with a bunch of government officials about to launch what looks like a parade float into the sky. And then Wu claps, a signal. The rope tightens, the kite lifts, and the hawk takes off. At first, it just flutters. Then it climbs, like a real bird. The crowd murmurs, some politely impressed, others mildly terrified. Wu turns to you and grins like a teenager, showing off a new skateboard trick. "This one," he whispers, "is only the beginning. You didn't come here expecting a lesson in aviation history, but here we are. Long before the Wright brothers ever bent a wing, and centuries before Da Vinci started sketching airborne corkscrews, people in ancient China were messing around with flight. Kites were invented over 2,000 years ago, some say during the Warring States period, and used not just for fun, but for military signaling, communication, even psychological warfare. Wu wasn't the first to be obsessed with them, but he might have been the most theatrical. You see, in the no-pants court of Emperor Wu, kites weren't just toys. They were tools, symbols, statements. Some were built for beauty, dragons that danced in the wind, fish that shimmered in sunlight. Others, for more practical purposes. Wu had the imperial engineers construct enormous human-shaped kites, complete with jointed arms and hollow compartments. The idea? Surveillance. Or maybe something more dramatic. One account says he planned to send spies over enemy walls on these kites. Another claims he launched convicted criminals with written confessions tied to their belts to serve as airborne warnings. Historians are still debating whether this was brilliant psychological warfare or just a midlife crisis with extra string. You walk along a row of partially assembled frames, some bamboo, others reinforced with thin bronze rods. One is shaped like a butterfly the size of a delivery wagon. Another, a grinning demon holding a banner that reads, "Behold the winds of Zhou." Subtlety was not Wu's strong suit. The Kite Lab, as palace insiders started calling it, was funded by royal decree. Resources were pulled from other departments: military strategy, economic planning, tofu production. One exasperated advisor once muttered that the emperor cares more about wind than wheat. He was reassigned to kite duty by morning. The kite team became a mini court of its own. Artisans, engineers, wind watchers, and unfortunate volunteers, some of whom were strapped into these flying beasts. Yes, strapped in. Because here's the strangest part. Wu wasn't content to just send up objects. He wanted people to fly. Now, before you panic, let's be clear. They weren't meant to land gracefully. These weren't gliders. They were, at best, brief bursts of airborne performance. The idea was to hover long enough to impress, then, ideally, land in a controlled heap, or haystack, or pond. One courtier, a slightly too confident calligrapher named Shen, volunteered for what became known as the first imperial wind walk. They tied him to a double-winged kite shaped like a phoenix, lit ceremonial incense, and waited for the right gust. It worked. For a moment, he soared, 30 feet off the ground, arms flapping not by choice. His scream echoed across the courtyard. Then, he nosedived into a patch of ornamental cabbage. Shen survived. He became famous, and he never wrote poetry again. From then on, Wu ordered softer landing zones, more hay, fewer vegetables. You sit under a parasol now, watching a new test run. The kite is shaped like a bat with embroidered stars on its wings. The test pilot this time is a small, wiry man with a suspiciously blank expression. You wonder if he was a volunteer or just not paying attention during lunch. The wind kicks up. The kite twitches, then lifts. You hold your breath. For 3 heartbeats, it floats, elegant, surreal, dreamlike. Then a rope snaps. The pilot swings sideways, crashes through a decorative archway, and lands in a fountain. Emperor Wu claps, delighted. Improvement, he says. He turned midair. You want to argue that it wasn't on purpose, but decide against it. There's something magnetic about Wu's madness. His belief that humans could defy gravity, that silk and bamboo and enough imperial funding could make people fly. Maybe it wasn't science, maybe it was theater, but standing there with the wind lifting banners and the air smelling like roasted chestnuts and lavender oil, it doesn't feel ridiculous. It feels like possibility. You're handed a fan shaped like a cloud, and someone offers you a candied plum. Nearby, officials take notes on wind speed, lift angles, and whether screaming improves aerodynamics. It's all so absurd, so elegant, so Wu. Historians are still debating whether Wu's kite experiments were proto-aeronautics or elaborate punishments disguised as innovation. One thing's for sure, he turned the sky into his playground, one gust at a time. The kite from earlier floats back to Earth now, caught in a tree near the Hall of Harmony. You can hear the pilot groaning gently, face first in the branches. Wu waves it off. Next design, a dragonfly. I want sparkle. You lean back, breathing in the sweet, dusty air, and wonder what tomorrow will bring. More flight tests? Probably. More robes? Definitely. Pants? Absolutely not. You're standing on the rooftop of the West Pagoda with a kite string burning a red line into your palm. The sky is smeared in watercolor pastels, faded blue, sleepy pink, and the kind of orange that makes you crave apricots. Below, the Capitol churns slowly to life with the gentle clatter of wagons, temple bells ringing in the distance, and the constant rustle of robes brushing against stone. And up here, someone is about to be launched off a building. It's not you yet. Emperor Wu, lounging under a parasol held by a eunuch with very steady arms, watches with childlike glee. His fingers are stained with ink from this morning's battle of poets, which involved 3 rhyming insults and a dead fish. But now, his focus is on the wind. "Higher," he murmurs. "Make him see the rooftops of sin." You're still not sure if that's metaphorical or literal, but it's Wu. At this point, you've stopped asking. The kite is ready. It's a beast, 35 feet wide, shaped like a thunder god riding a flaming wheel. The person strapped to it? General Ping. He offended Wu last week by suggesting soldiers might actually prefer pants in winter. Big mistake. Now he stands nervously in his ceremonial robes, bound to the kite's bamboo spine with tight silk cords, knees wobbling, looking very much like a man regretting his career choices. "General," Wu calls, smiling. "Remember, arms out, not up. We want glide, not flail." The general tries to nod. With a clap, attendants release the kite. The wind takes it, and ping, over the edge of the pagoda. You and everyone else lean forward. There is a moment, the tiniest moment, where the kite soars, gracefully, smoothly, an almost triumphant arc above the courtyard. And then it dips. It lurches left. A gust slaps its side. Ping lets out a sound somewhere between a scream and a polite apology. The kite crashes through a paper lantern installation, skids across a peach orchard, and finally comes to rest in a koi pond. The koi are displeased. Wu fans himself thoughtfully. "Progress," he murmurs. "Perhaps more tail next time." You rub your temples. This was the 3rd accidental launch this week. At first, the whole kite obsession seemed whimsical. Sure, a little dangerous, but mostly ceremonial, artistic, like a hobby that got out of hand. But lately, the flying has gotten targeted. Certain ministers, you notice, are being picked more often for aerial honor flights, and not the popular ones. Not the robe swishers or the poem whisperers. No, it's the policy critics, the generals who ask for more grain rations, the advisors who mention pants even a little too fondly. Wu doesn't execute them. That would be crude. No, he lifts them, literally. One advisor was told he would gain perspective and spent 20 seconds dangling over the city gardens before crash landing in the decorative moat. The next morning, he submitted a 40-page policy reversal in calligraphy. Historians are still debating whether these flights were punishment or enlightenment, whispers a nearby scribe, as you both pretend to write wind measurements. I think they're just expensive tantrums. Another scribe leans in. Did you hear about the eunuch who sneezed during a kite prayer. Wu made him run the next test tied to a panda-shaped glider. You can't tell if they're joking. Meanwhile, Wu has moved on to inspecting another design, this one shaped like a carp with wings. His mood is unusually bright. He gestures toward you. "You," he says. "You seem light. How's your balance?" You freeze, halfway through chewing on a sesame bun. He can't mean, can he? But he grins, already distracted by the silk tail measurements. You slip quietly behind a pile of kites and make a mental note. Never, ever look too eager. Despite the bruises and the koi pond incidents, the kite program continues. Some of the nobles are beginning to think of it as an honor. A few even volunteer. There's an entire ceremony now. Robes embroidered with clouds, trumpets, poetry read aloud as the flyer is strapped in. Like a wedding, but with more wind and fewer survivors. One elderly astrologer insisted on being launched to chart the stars more clearly. He landed in a cabbage cart outside the city wall. His chart, completely illegible. But Wu framed it. You stroll through the Imperial Kite Workshop that night, the moon casting silver shapes through the paper windows. You run your hand along a wing that sparkles with tiny glass beads. There's beauty here, and madness, and maybe something deeper. Wu claims the wind speaks to him. That high above the city, messages come through. Visions, prophecies, the will of the sky. You've seen him stand on the roof with his arms outstretched, listening. He talks about lightness of spirit and elevation of mind. You also saw him throw a dumpling at a diplomat last week, so take it with a grain of salt. Still, it's hard to shake the feeling that these flights mean more to him than anyone truly understands. Is he trying to escape something? Is he just bored? Or does he honestly believe he's unlocking the secrets of the air? One midnight, you find yourself on the same rooftop again. Alone this time. A gentle breeze curls around your ankles. In the distance, a half-moon kite drifts lazily above the city. Someone's midnight experiment bobbing in the sky like a paper ghost. You lie down on the tiles, robe pooling around you like spilled ink, and close your eyes. From here, the world is quiet, soft, breezy. Maybe Wu's not entirely wrong. Maybe the wind does speak. You wake up to the smell of horse butter and sandalwood. That's not a metaphor. Someone is literally rubbing fermented mare's milk onto a decorative saddle while chanting softly about the moon. You sit up from your borrowed robe pile and immediately bump heads with a passing servant carrying a bronze gong shaped like a fish. No one apologizes. They just keep chanting. Another day in Emperor Wu's court. You're still rubbing the sleep from your eyes when a court official hands you a scroll. "Today's schedule," he says, as if this were completely normal. You unroll it. Morning, poetic court duels. Midday, interpretive robe dance with lunch. Afternoon, dream symposium. Evening, Trial of the Whistling Window, Thief, Midnight. Mandatory, contemplative staring under the moon. Yep, just another Tuesday. You shuffle into the main audience hall, where the Emperor sits with his legs neatly folded under a throne that looks like a dragon got bored and took up woodworking. Wu's expression is serene. He's holding a peach pit in one hand and someone else's earring in the other. You decide not to ask. "Let the verse begin," he whispers. A minister with spectacular eyebrows stands and recites a poem about mist, goats, and unrequited love. His voice cracks dramatically on "do." Wu nods. A second courtier responds with a haiku about fish bones. Someone snaps their fingers in approval. You blink. Are you awake? Did you fall into a performance art major's final exam? The poetry duels last an hour. One man faints. Wu has him fanned with lotus leaves and given a rice cake. Next up, lunch. But not before the robe dance. You're herded, gently, but with clear expectations, into the garden of harmonious socks, which, fun fact, contains no socks. A trio of eunuchs in lavender tunics demonstrate long swirls of fabric, precise toe taps, spins timed to flute chirps. Then it's your turn. You try. You really do. But your sash gets caught on a passing tortoise and you knock over a ceremonial drum filled with incense ash. Wu watches with amusement and claps anyway. "This one dances like regret," he says. So truthful. You're given extra rice. Here's the thing. None of this is for show. It's not some rare festival or imperial holiday. This is just how Wu runs things. The entire court is a blend of theater, ritual, and dream logic. Take the Dream Symposium, for example. Everyone is required to share a recent dream. Then a panel of dream interpreters, led by a man named Uncle Goose, who claims to talk to spirits through his kneecaps, decides what it means for policy. One official dreams of a crab wearing spectacles. Interpretation: increase funding for river patrols. Another dreams of eating a scroll. Interpretation: emergency audit of imperial archives. You make something up on the spot about flying pillows and soup that judges you. The panel murmurs deeply. Wu decides this means the tax code is too harsh on weavers. Historians are still debating whether these interpretations were sincere or just the world's most elaborate excuses to do whatever Wu already wanted. By now, you've begun to notice a pattern. Wu's court doesn't run on logic. It runs on vibes. If something feels important, it is. If a squirrel jumps onto the bell tower mid-discussion, it's a sign. If a ribbon flutters northward during a speech, the policy gets tabled for another day. It's not inefficiency, it's intuition. This leads to some very strange policies. For example, a ban on potatoes because someone dreamed they were whispering slander, or a new tax break for musicians after a robin landed near a lute during a moonlight stroll. One time, a sneeze during a budget meeting was interpreted as a divine rejection of increased corn tariffs. You watch all this unfold, robe dragging behind you, eyes slightly glazed. Somehow, it's all working. The empire's still standing. People are still eating. Bureaucrats are, surprisingly, thriving in this chaos. Turns out, once you stop worrying about logic, life becomes extremely flexible. You wander past the hall of silken distress, where officials read out sad news in rhyming couplets to soften the blow. Today's dispatch: a warehouse burned down, but the smoke looked elegantly tragic. Wu approved of the phrasing. Later, in the whisper court, a small chamber where no one is allowed to speak above a murmur, you sit beside a general describing an entire military campaign using only interpretive shoulder shrugs. It ends with jazz hands. Everyone applauds. There's even a minister whose job is just to sigh deeply at important moments. His timing is impeccable. At sunset, you attend the trial of the whistling window thief. The accused is an 8-year-old who allegedly stole ceremonial bells and installed them on palace shutters. He stands in front of Wu, wearing a robe several sizes too large, eyes defiant. "Did you do it?" Wu asks, gently. The boy nods. "Why?" "I wanted the wind to play a song when I opened the window." The entire room sighs. The minister in charge of sighing lets out an extra long one. Wu considers. Then he smiles. "Promote him," he says. Chief of Breeze Aesthetics. By midnight, you're lying on your back in the courtyard of still thoughts. Everyone is staring at the moon, not talking, just watching. Your head rests on your folded robe. Fireflies flicker above. A flute plays somewhere in the dark. For the first time, you understand. This is less of a government and more of a shared dream. A theater of velvet nonsense. A robe-wrapped fever vision where logic takes a nap and creativity runs the meetings. Is it practical? Not at all. Is it working? Somehow. And as the emperor stares up at the sky, mumbling softly about designing a kite shaped like a thought, you find yourself relaxing into the rhythm of it all. No pants, no rules, just robes, riddles, and the occasional airborne general. It's dawn, and you're ankle deep in something sticky. You're not sure what it is. Possibly ceremonial honey, maybe glue. There's also a goose watching you with intense suspicion. The sky is a milky blue, the kind that suggests strange things are about to happen, which, to be fair, is every day now. Today, you've been conscripted into Emperor Wu's latest military initiative. You thought you were just tagging along to observe, maybe take notes, maybe avoid being strapped to a kite. But no, you're now standing on the edge of a training field where soldiers are rehearsing battle maneuvers that look more like a halftime show. Welcome to the strategic mind of Wu. At first glance, this military exercise might appear chaotic. A squad of soldiers is marching in spirals, while waving colorful banners shaped like clouds. Over there, a unit in pink robes is practicing synchronized bows. Somewhere off to the side, two generals are arguing over whether the flamingo formation is more intimidating or playful. You're handed a small gong and told to ring it if you see anything particularly inspiring. No pressure. Wu, of course, is watching from his usual silk-draped throne on a raised platform. He has a parasol embroidered with tiny swords above his head and a bowl of chilled melon cubes by his side. He nods thoughtfully as an entire battalion forms a pattern that, from above, would resemble a plum blossom. "Tactics," he says, "but make it art." You'd laugh if this wasn't somehow working. See, Wu had an unconventional approach to warfare. He believed that confusion could be a weapon, that unpredictability was stronger than brute force. So instead of drilling soldiers in straightforward formations, he had them perform elaborate, poetic routines. Formations that looked like flowers, marches based on music, flags that told riddles. One general once suggested actual combat drills. Wu replied, "Why teach them to fight in lines when they can dance in spirals?" You try to imagine a battle fought with interpretive motion. Turns out, it actually happened. There's an account, half military record, half fever dream, of a border skirmish where Wu's troops approached the enemy while chanting haikus and waving fans. The opposing commander thought it was either a surrender or an invitation to a festival. By the time he figured out they were armed, his flank was already collapsing. Historians are still debating whether this haiku ambush was genius strategy or pure luck. Either way, it worked, and Wu loved a good spectacle. He once staged a mock invasion just to test a theory. Could his troops communicate solely through symbolic dance? The answer was, sort of. Two soldiers dislocated their hips, trying to interpret a retreat signal, and one horse got so confused it lay down mid-charge. Still, the emperor clapped and declared it a glorious disaster. You walk past a cluster of trainees practicing something called the peacock maneuver. It involves spinning, flaring sleeves and holding mirrors toward the sun to confuse the enemy. You're briefly blinded, then applauded for your symbolic stumble. Near the rear, another unit is rehearsing animal-themed tactics. One group gallops like horses, another crouches like frogs. There's even a small detachment painted like tigers, roaring softly and awkwardly, adjusting their robes. And then there's the goat. You hear it before you see it. A faint, determined bleating. Turns out, Wu has introduced a new military mascot, a goat named Minister Hoof. Legend says he picked it after the animal ate a rival diplomat's paperwork. Now the goat has a helmet and a rank. You watch, utterly spellbound, as Minister Hoof is led ceremonially through the ranks while incense is waved in his honor. He sneezes. Wu declares it a good omen. You whisper to another official, "Is any of this, real strategy?" The man shrugs. We haven't lost a war since the goat showed up. There's also the matter of the giant kite banner. At one point during the exercise, a group of attendants begins unfurling a massive kite high above the battlefield. It bears the symbol of the phoenix and is filled with glowing lanterns. Wu believes the sight of it demoralizes enemies and uplifts his troops. You believe it's a fire hazard, and yet it's beautiful. It catches the wind and soars above the formations like a silent guardian, turning the entire field into something that feels sacred. The soldiers pause to look up. Even the goat seems impressed. Maybe this is the secret. Wu's warfare isn't about brute strength. It's about morale, theater, making people believe in the impossible. If your army looks like a floating miracle, maybe the enemy just runs away or laughs themselves into surrender. Later, during the post-drill debrief, held over cups of plum wine and sweet rice dumplings, Wu takes notes with a brush shaped like a crane. He hums as he writes. You peek at his scroll. Battle notes. Too much fog machine? Dancer with itchy armpit. Ease delay in left flank. Fire kite is more glitter next time. You stifle a laugh and catch Wu looking at you. I see you doubt, he says calmly. You start to explain that no, you're just impressed. He smiles. War is ugly. Let us dress it well. And with that, he gets up and walks off across the field, robe trailing behind him like a curtain of silk thunder. The sky darkens as clouds gather, and the wind changes direction. Tomorrow, he whispers, there will be another drill, a new formation, and possibly a kite shaped like a yak. You ring your gong quietly, just in case it means something. You're in a dim stone cellar, surrounded by trousers. It's quiet, too quiet. Candles flicker along the walls, casting long shadows that look suspiciously like disobedience. A soft scuff of fabric echoes behind you. Someone coughs. Another person mutters something about reinforced seams. Welcome to the resistance. Yes, there is a pants rebellion. Of course there is. Did you really think you could ban leg coverings across an entire empire and not spark a fashion-based uprising? It's small at first. A whisper here, a rolled-up pair of trousers hidden in a basket of dumplings there. But beneath the robe swishing, kite launching, moon poem reading surface of Emperor Wu's court, there's a movement growing in the shadows. People who miss the practicality of pants. People who long for pockets. You shuffle along the tunnel behind a woman named Taylor Shue. She wears a voluminous robe over what you now realize is a full pair of contraband trousers. Linen. Wide-legged. Crisp. It's like seeing someone hold forbidden knowledge in fabric form. She nods at you. We meet in secret. We sew in silence. We stitch for freedom. You want to laugh, but then you remember that last week, someone was publicly shamed for wearing leggings under their tunic. had to carry around a chicken on their head for 3 days. Wu called it a soft punishment with poultry. The rebellion calls itself the Lower Garment League. They have chapters in villages, towns, even some palace kitchens. They smuggle pants disguised as grain sacks. They use coded phrases like, "Time to harvest the Twin Rivers," meaning, pull on your pants and run. Their symbol, a discreet pair of crossed suspenders carved into tree trunks or etched into the margins of imperial memos. Historians are still debating whether the League was ever large enough to be a real threat. Some say it was just a collection of disgruntled laundry workers and chilly scholars. Others claim it nearly toppled Wu's fashion regime. What's clear is this: they were organized. You sit down in the flickering gloom beside a philosophy teacher and a retired horse groomer. Both wear robes, but you spot the hidden trousers beneath. They nod at you solemnly. "The emperor has noble ideas," says the groomer, "but sometimes a man needs to climb a ladder without worrying about a draft." A chorus of quiet agreement. One woman, clearly the group's strategist, unrolls a map of the palace and points to several laundry chutes. "If we can slip a pair of pants into the emperor's personal wardrobe, even once, the implications hang in the air like a rogue waistband. It's not just about comfort anymore. It's about freedom, autonomy, the right to choose your own leg wear. You're handed a needle and thread. Sew," someone whispers. "Sew like your dignity depends on it." You try. Your stitches are terrible, but no one judges. Later that night, as you sneak back through the garden under a robe that now contains a secret cargo of corduroys, you spot something strange. A minister, one of Wu's favorites, standing alone by a peach tree, staring at his own feet. He sighs, lifts the edge of his robe. Underneath, pants, silk, embroidered with tiny pine trees. You don't say a word. You just nod. He nods back. There are more of them than you realized. By morning, you're back in the official court. The emperor holds an audience beneath a ceiling painted with clouds and cranes. He's in a particularly floaty robe today, one with golden tassels that make a sound like distant bells. "Let us discuss rebellion," he says softly. Everyone freezes. You glance at your sleeves, trying not to sweat. "Someone," Wu continues, "has been distributing undergarments with ambitions," a low murmur. One official faints, possibly on purpose. Wu rises. "I do not fear rebellion. Rebellion is a kite string pulled too tight, but make no mistake, pants are a step backward." He paces slowly, each footstep echoing on the lacquered floor. "We are a people of air, of wind, of flow. Why trap ourselves in cloth prisons?" He gestures, and a servant brings forward a pair of confiscated pants on a silver tray, as though they were a rare artifact or a cursed gemstone. "These were found in the Hall of Winds," Wu says, folded. A scandalized gasp. He gazes out across the room. I will not punish the wearer today, but let it be known the robe is freedom. The robe is the sky. Pants are betrayal. Then he pauses. But perhaps everyone leans forward. There is room for negotiation. We shall host a debate. And just like that, a new event is added to the court calendar. The Great Pants Debate. You're roped into helping prepare the arena. It's going to be held in the Echo Pavilion, a room famous for its acoustics and suspiciously flexible flooring. Representatives from both sides will speak, one in robes, one in trousers. It's all anyone talks about. The league prepares passionate arguments about mobility, temperature regulation, and social equity. Wu's faction counters with philosophy, spiritual symbolism, and of course, fashion. On the night of the debate, the pavilion is packed. Even the goat shows up. There are speeches, counter speeches, dramatic robe twirls, and one accidental wardrobe malfunction that sends a pair of illegal culottes fluttering onto the stage. The crowd gasps. Wu raises a hand. Silence falls. And then he laughs. Long, loud, genuine. We are ridiculous, he says, but gloriously so. He waves his sleeve. Let the robe remain dominant, but let the trousers speak. And just like that, he permits a small exception. Pants on holidays and when carrying heavy furniture. The crowd erupts. It's not a revolution. Not yet, but it's a start. You sit under a lantern, listening to the laughter, the sighs, the flutter of silk in the wind. Somewhere in the darkness, a tailor smiles and gets back to work. You're kneeling beside a curtain of pale blue silk, peeking through a pinhole so tiny it might as well be a daydream. On the other side of it is the emperor's bedchamber, dimly lit, scented with incense, and completely silent, except for the scratch of a brush against paper. Emperor Wu is writing in his dream journal. You didn't even know he had a dream journal until last night, when a court whisperer hinted at a midnight ritual that determined everything from national policy to the week's lunch menu. And now, here you are, spying through a tiny tear in the royal drapery, trying not to sneeze from the overpowering smell of sandalwood and lavender oil. He sits cross-legged, his robe puddled around him like a silk cloud. There's a bowl of dried lotus seeds nearby, untouched. A silver tray holds 3 brushes, one thin, one medium, and one unnecessarily large, which he's using now. The paper glows faintly in the candlelight. He murmurs as he writes. Last night, a frog perched atop a mountain, holding a flute, but the flute was a fish. You blink. Did he just say, yes? He adds thoughtfully. The fish began to whistle, and then exploded into coins. You quietly adjust your ear against the curtain. This is wild. For Wu, dreams aren't private. They're prophecies, guiding lights. Sometimes, full-on imperial decrees are based on them. A dream about swimming with snakes He ordered the creation of a canal shaped like one. A dream about flying spoons. That led to a new musical instrument. No one really liked it, but they clapped anyway. This latest one seems particularly vivid. Wu continues. Then a star fell into my soup. The soup turned into laughter. I woke up weeping. He leans back, satisfied. He doesn't write interpretations. That's the job of the Dream Tribunal. An elite circle of interpreters who meet each morning to parse the symbols of Wu's unconscious mind. You've seen them in action. One strokes a stuffed ferret for inspiration. Another wears bells on his elbows and insists they help him hear the hidden meanings. Historians are still debating whether the tribunal was a sincere mystical practice or just very dedicated nonsense. You slip away from your spying spot before anyone catches you and wander toward the tribunal chambers. As expected, today's dream is already posted on the wall outside, copied down in flowing script. The frog with the fish flute. A star falls into soup. The soup laughs. The emperor weeps. Inside, the tribunal is mid-discussion. Clearly, says the ferret stroker, the frog is the general. The fish is truth. The mountain represents shame. No, no, replies Bell Elbows, jingling with every gesture. It's obvious. The fish represents taxation. The flute is policy. The coins are peasants. The star is surprise silk tariffs. They argue. Notes are taken. Tea is spilled. Eventually, they settle on this conclusion. Imperial action. Increase funding for frog sanctuaries. Reduce soup production in favor of laughter festivals. Institute coin-based tax review. By lunch, it's official policy. You eat your rice dumpling in stunned silence as the emperor unveils the day's decrees beneath a painting of clouds riding horses. He seems pleased. Dreams, he says, are the voice of the unshaped world. It would be easy to dismiss all this as pure silliness, except that Wu believes it. He truly sees the dreamscape as a realm of prophecy. One court tale says he once canceled a military campaign because he dreamed a ghost tripped over his own shoe. That same ghost later appeared in another dream and apologized. The campaign resumed. And it's not just Wu's dreams he records. The entire court is now required to log their dreams weekly. Dream scrolls are submitted alongside tax forms. Some people fabricate increasingly elaborate dreams just to gain favor. One minister claimed he dreamed of a golden crane reciting tax law in verse, and was promoted the next day. Others are more cautious. One unfortunate steward dreamed of a river turning to blood. He was immediately reassigned to mop duty in the bathhouse for safety. You're issued your own dream scroll. You're expected to fill it out by morning. That night, you lie in your guest quarters, eyes wide, wondering what on earth you can dream that won't get you demoted to goat inspector. You finally scribble. a turtle in a library, wearing boots, reciting poetry backward. In the morning, the tribunal declares it a metaphor for overcomplication and assigns you to help reorganize the imperial archives. Honestly, not the worst outcome. Wu himself continues to be a prolific dreamer. He drinks a special slumber tea each night, steeped with magnolia petals and crushed pearl powder, and wraps himself in a weighted robe stitched with stars. It's rumored that he sometimes sleep talks in ancient dialects. One night, he supposedly recited the recipe for a sauce lost for generations. They serve it now on roasted duck. It's excellent. But as with everything in Wu's court, the line between performance and policy is blurry. Does he truly believe his dreams are divine whispers? Or is this a poetic way to soften absolute rule? Is the tribunal a genuine think tank, or the world's most eccentric improv troupe? Historians are still debating whether the dream system was a mystical tradition or a form of subconscious bureaucracy. You, personally, are starting to enjoy it. There's something comforting about a world where policy can be decided by whether the emperor sees a lizard or a ladder in his sleep. At the very least, it's never boring. One evening, you sit beside Wu as the sun sets over the kite field. He watches a swallow-tailed kite drift across the sky. I dreamed of a voice without a mouth, he says. It asked me why pants have secrets. You glance at him. He doesn't explain, just smiles. You nod slowly, sipping your tea. Yeah, that makes sense now. The drums begin at dawn, soft, steady, ceremonial. You blink yourself awake beneath your robe blanket and shuffle toward the sound. You're starting to move like the rest of them now. Graceful, slow, slightly confused, but with purpose. A court official hands you a sash. For the procession of mild punishments, he says, with the kind of gravity one might use to announce a royal wedding. You follow a line of sleepy ministers to the southern courtyard, where an entire parade is already forming. And leading it, a man in a bright green robe, wearing a hat shaped like a chicken. Welcome to Wu's version of justice. Out here, under the big orange sun, the emperor has gathered a selection of offenders to be publicly and very, very weirdly punished. But not flogged or imprisoned. No, that would be far too grim for Wu's court. Instead, there's shame. There's spectacle. Wait, is that a kazoo? Yes. Yes, it is. Wu believed that the punishment should fit the mood, and the mood, generally, was somewhere between opera rehearsal and circus brunch. So he created the Parade of Absurd Consequences, a weekly event where minor crimes, lateness, boring poetry, improperly folded sashes were handled with flair. Today's lineup includes a minister who fell asleep during last week's dream symposium, a court painter who depicted a dragon with eyes that were too judgmental, and a stable boy who whistled in the Hall of Stillness twice. All are walking the parade route wearing elaborate hats of shame. One is shaped like a soup ladle. Another is a giant rubber fish with blinking glass eyeballs. The offenders carry scrolls describing their crimes in verse. You can't decide if it's performance art or statecraft. Probably both. The parade winds through the courtyard, past groups of officials clapping politely and murmuring critiques. Excellent remorse posture, one says, but his pacing lacks emotional arc. Wu arrives last, riding in a sedan chair shaped like a cloud, surrounded by flute players and two dancers with fans made of peacock feathers. He seems delighted. This, he says, is what true correction looks like. You try not to smile as the kazoo squad launches into a mournful version of a traditional lullaby. The punishment system is extensive. There's a whole book of options. Page after page of creative consequences. Writing apologies using a brush strapped to your foot. Reciting your least favorite poem aloud while standing in a puddle. Wearing a robe inside out for a week. Being followed by someone who whispers shame, shame during meal times. Carrying a duck. Just all day. You once saw an official forced to walk backward for 3 days because he suggested shortening the royal kite strings for safety. Another time, a food taster who insulted the emperor's dumplings had to build a dumpling-shaped hut and live in it for a month. Historians are still debating whether these punishments were effective discipline or elaborate performance therapy. And while these theatrical reprimands might seem ridiculous, they worked surprisingly well. Court behavior improved. Tensions diffused. No one wanted to wear the hat of spilled milk in public. Plus, Wu watched every parade. He studied the expressions, the posture, the rhythm of each march. It told him more about loyalty and pride than 1,000 court memos. He once promoted a man simply for bowing with convincing regret. Today's star offender is the minister with the chicken hat. His crime? Sending a memo in prose instead of verse. Unforgivable. He walks with dignity. At the end of the route, he kneels before Wu and recites an apology poem about egg yolks and miscommunication. It's honestly not bad. Wu claps once. Your rhythm has improved. The minister bows and is handed a peach. Punishment complete. You followed the procession as it disbands. Some officials remove their hats and toss them into the ceremonial shame cart, which will later be pulled by goats and set ablaze safely in the courtyard. Others stay behind for photos, painted records. You wander over to a group of onlookers discussing the parade like it's a theater review. I thought the soup ladle hat was derivative, one says. But the remorse squint, masterful, says another. They nod solemnly. You sit near the koi pond to rest. The koi seem less judgmental today. Maybe they liked the kazoo performance. Then Wu approaches, "Did you enjoy the procession?" he asks, crouching beside you. You nod. More entertaining than a trial. He smiles. Justice should not always bruise. Sometimes it should tickle. You consider this. You think about your own society. Legal codes, judges, dry robes. Maybe we take it all too seriously. Maybe walking through town with a goose on your head would make more people think twice before stealing office snacks. Wu tosses a pebble into the water. Some sins are too small for prisons, but perfect for parades. And with that, he stands, adjusting his robe, which today is embroidered with tiny scales to resemble a fish in flight. Naturally, later that night, you return to your quarters and find a small package waiting. It's a hat, shaped like a turtle, attached a note for overthinking things. Wear it in the mirror only. Then forgive yourself. You put it on. It fits perfectly. You're standing in a courtyard full of kites. Giant ones, long ones, flaming ones. One is shaped like a flower. Another looks like a whale with wheels. And the biggest? A crimson dragon with silk fangs and ribboned wings wide enough to shade a whole monastery. It sways lazily in the wind, anchored by thick cords tied to ceremonial pillars. This can only mean one thing. It's time for the annual Imperial Kite Festival. You didn't think it could get any stranger than a pants band and a military goat. But here you are, holding a commemorative fan and wearing a sash that says Kite Friend Class B. Whatever that means. Today is special. Emperor Wu's favorite festival. He's been preparing for weeks, designing new kite patterns, composing launch poems, and rehearsing the wind salutation dance. It's not optional. Even the servants are getting in on it. One's braiding ribbon into a horse's mane. Another is feeding helium into a fish-shaped lantern with a suspicious smile. You glance up. The sky is already speckled with color. Kites spinning like tiny prayers, dipping and weaving. It's beautiful, peaceful, and absolutely teetering on the edge of disaster. The first sign of trouble comes during the unveiling of the Emperor's newest masterpiece, the Phoenix of 10,000 Strings. It's absurd, magnificent, possibly illegal in several provinces, 10 stories tall, with tails so long they need their own attendants. It's designed to play music as it flies, using embedded pipes that whistle with the wind. Today, Wu announces proudly, the sky shall sing. He gestures. The cords are cut. The phoenix rises, slowly, majestically, like a silk leviathan uncoiling toward the sun. Then the wind shifts. The phoenix lists sideways. A minor pan flute note squeaks out, sounding, unfortunately, like a hiccup. Wu's face doesn't change. He raises one eyebrow, barely. And then the tail catches on the temple roof. There's a snap, a rustle, a whoosh, a burst of sparks, just a few. Nothing dramatic, just the entire corner of the temple starting to smoke. You stand frozen with your fan halfway open. Servants scatter. A monk shouts, "Not again!" Someone tries to fan the flames with a dinner tray. It doesn't help. You hear a crashing sound followed by what may be a scream or a kazoo solo. It's hard to tell. The phoenix kite drifts downward like a wounded myth, narrowly missing the Imperial Orchestra pit and lands squarely in the Royal Dumpling Pavilion. R.I.P. Dumplings. To Wu's credit, he does not panic. Instead, he claps once. A dramatic ending. Fire, the final element. Beautiful. Everyone nods. You help stamp out a stray ember while pretending this is all totally fine. Once the smoke clears and the phoenix is safely smoldering, the festival continues. Wu, ever the optimist, declares this the most exciting kite festival in 10 years. He even awards himself a ribbon, Sky Artist Supreme. The rest of the day includes a parade of miniature kites flown by trained cats. 2 escaped. A poetry contest themed When the Wind Forgets Me. And a team of jugglers dressed as clouds who eventually stop juggling and just lie down from exhaustion. Later, during the kite dance finale, you accidentally collide with a young nobleman while twirling your wind ribbon. You both fall into a tray of ceremonial pickles. Neither of you is punished. In fact, Wu declares it a symbolic embrace of sourness. As night falls, the sky becomes a galaxy of lantern kites, each glowing softly. Some resemble moons, others birds. One is just a very large pair of pants, launched by the Lower Garment League in quiet protest. It floats proudly. Wu pretends not to notice. You sip honeyed tea and sit beside the Emperor as he gazes upward. "Why do we fly?" he asks, mostly to himself. Is it to escape or to return? You consider this. Maybe both, you say. He nods, as if you've just revealed an ancient secret. There's something oddly touching about it all. The chaotic pageantry, the near misses, the kites that scream when the wind gets stuck in the wrong pipe. For all its absurdity, the festival feels honest. Like Wu is trying to lift the Empire's spirit as much as its decorations. Historians are still debating whether the kite festivals were political tools, pure art, or symptoms of a ruler who'd read too much wind poetry and not enough engineering manuals. But to you, they feel like joy. Dangerous, flammable joy. Eventually, the embers fade. The crowd disperses. The phoenix of 10,000 strings lies in a crumpled but proud heap, its tail still twitching like it wants one more flight. You help gather fallen ribbon, stepping over a burnt dumpling and a scorched pan flute. A child runs past with a kite shaped like a sheep. Someone's hat blows away. Laughter trails behind. Wu watches it all and smiles. Tomorrow, there will be rebuilding. Today, the sky sang. There's an awkward silence in the banquet hall. You're seated on a silk cushion between a diplomat from the western regions who's desperately trying to eat soup with chopsticks, and a local noble who keeps fanning his inner thigh because, no surprise, The no pants policy remains non-negotiable. Across the hall, Emperor Wu is raising a toast with a goblet shaped like a goose. He's dressed in ceremonial robes patterned with clouds, cranes, and what might be flying saucers. The foreign guests blink politely. Welcome to No Pants Diplomacy. It's an international dinner tonight. Envoys from India, Persia, and the Korean kingdoms are all in attendance. Most of them are trying very hard to pretend they're not extremely confused about the leg situation. Some have followed protocol and ditched their trousers. Others have tried to compromise with long tunics. One has simply cut 2 vertical slits into his pants and is hoping no one notices. They notice. Wu welcomes them with a bow so wide it could double as an airfoil. Here, he says, we wear no barriers between earth and leg. You glance nervously at your own robe and clutch your sash a little tighter. The dinner begins. First course, jellyfish soup, served lukewarm in bowls shaped like lily pads. Next, pickled plum blossoms arranged into the face of an owl. Then a dish so spicy, a Korean envoy immediately hiccups, then apologizes profusely to the bowl. You sip water. It tastes like flowers and mild anxiety. Conversation drifts politely across trade routes, seasonal poetry, and the optimal curvature of ceremonial spoons. But beneath the surface, you can feel it, the tension of clashing cultures. Some guests whisper, others fidget. One diplomat seems to be drawing plans for emergency pants under the table. And then, Wu decides to break the ice. He claps. Musicians appear. Dancers swirl into the hall with long ribbons and barely their sleeves. A singer begins to croon an ode titled, When My Robes Caress the Horizon. You zone out somewhere between the third verse and the interpretive swan flapping, but snap back when a dancer spins directly into a table, knocking over a sauce dish shaped like a turtle. The sauce, a sweet smoky plum glaze, lands squarely in the lap of a Persian ambassador. He doesn't react. Wu laughs lightly. Ah, the plum chooses its master. Polite chuckles all around. The diplomat smiles. You're 90% sure it's through gritted teeth. After dessert, which, for some reason, involves shaved bamboo and whispering affirmations, a new event begins. The Great Cultural Exchange. One by one, the foreign envoys are invited to share a tradition or object from their homeland. The Korean envoy presents an intricate ink brush. The Indian ambassador offers a carved sandalwood elephant. The Persian diplomat offers a jeweled dagger, possibly out of passive-aggressive instinct. And then Wu shares his gift, a kite. Not just any kite, a pants-shaped kite, giant, red, embroidered with silver thread in the pattern of a map. To remind us, he says, of the many paths that divide us and the wind that unites. The room is silent, then applause. Relieved, you applaud too, possibly too loudly. Wu is already orchestrating the launch. The kite is carried into the courtyard, where the wind has picked up again, as if scripted. It lifts off cleanly, a glorious symbol of cultural misunderstanding turned airborne metaphor. Historians are still debating whether this was satire, sincerity, or some cosmic mix of both. Back at the banquet, the mood is easier now. Wu invites the guests to join him in a round of spirit writing, where everyone dips feathers into ink and tries to write compliments to each other using only their non-dominant hand and no vowels. The Korean envoy writes something that looks like a threat, but is interpreted as a haiku. The Persian diplomat draws a cat and claims it represents flexibility. Meanwhile, you spill ink on your robe. Wu sees, nods sagely, and says, "Truth always leaves a stain." There's more wine, more clapping, and impromptu debate over whether the moon has its own bureaucracy. It does, according to Wu. Now, at one point, the Indian ambassador, clearly emboldened by plum wine, asks the question everyone's been avoiding. "Your Majesty, what is so wrong with pants?" The room goes still. Wu closes his eyes. A long pause. He breathes in through his nose, like he's drawing air straight from the mountains. Then, calmly, they strangle the knees. They suppress the soul. The ambassador nods slowly. "I see." You're not sure he does, but the emperor beams, and a flute starts up again before anyone can press further. The night ends with a gift exchange. Wu gives each guest a commemorative kite, shaped like a crane, painted in their national colors, with a secret pocket containing a poem about dreams and weather. The envoys leave impressed, confused, possibly slightly bruised by the strong incense and even stronger political theater. You walk Wu back through the garden. He hums, robe fluttering in the cool night breeze. "They'll talk about this for years," he says. You nod, probably in detail. He smiles, content. "You know," he adds, "I might allow socks next year." You don't dare ask if he's serious. As you head to bed, you look back at the sky. Above the palace, the pants kite still floats gently, its silken legs fluttering in the wind. Diplomatic, defiant, and utterly ridiculous. Just like everything else around here, the chamber is dim and oddly quiet, lit only by the flickering glow of lanterns shaped like tiny pants. You never expected to be here. You creep through the narrow hallway, ducking past a velvet curtain embroidered with imperial symbols and something suspiciously resembling a zipper. You're not alone. 2 courtiers and a highly stressed goat, not the goat, but possibly a cousin, are tiptoeing behind you, their robes rustling like whispered secrets. Welcome to the Pantorium. The Forbidden Pantorium, to be precise. Deep beneath the eastern wing of the palace, behind a door labeled "Storage, Silk Only," lies Emperor Wu's most curious secret, an underground chamber full of confiscated trousers. You were led here by Taylor Shu, unofficial leader of the Lower Garment League. She lit a candle, whispered, "May the wind forgive us," and pushed open the hidden door with all the reverence of a monk opening a scroll. Now, you're surrounded by stacks of folded pants. Not just stacks. Towers, crates, mannequins wearing bell-bottoms, walls lined with linen, cotton, wool, silk, even, somehow, denim. You stare at a pair of faded blue jeans, like you've just seen the moon in a soup bowl. "They called this place the Room of Wrong Legs," whispers Shu, "but here we call it hope." You run your hand along a pair of finely tailored slacks. Soft, practical, slightly rebellious. They feel like something from another universe. "I don't understand," you say. "If Wu banned all of this, why keep it?" Shio gestures toward the far wall. There, half covered in dust and cobwebs, is a robe. And beside it, a pair of pants, golden, embroidered, imperial seal at the waist, neatly folded. "Those," Shio says, "are his." Your eyes widen. Historians are still debating whether Emperor Wu ever wore pants as an adult. Official records make no mention of it. The man himself claimed to have been reborn into leg freedom sometime around the age of 16. But here they are. Proof. Imperial trousers. You stare at them like they might leap off the table and recite a confession. "They were made for him," says Shu. "He wore them once, before the decree, before the ban." The silence hangs heavy. You feel something shift in your understanding. Maybe the ban wasn't about purity or philosophy or politics. Maybe it was about hiding the past, the vulnerability of legs once covered. You look around again. The room is a museum of contradiction. Trousers from every region of the empire, stitched, patched, pressed. Some tagged with confiscation dates, others wrapped in red ribbon as if for study. One pair, marked Southern Silk Raiders, 558 CE, has tiny bells sewn into the cuffs. Another is built for horseback riding, with reinforced knees and a faded note pinned to the waistband. Too practical to burn. This isn't just storage, it's preservation. A history of what was banned, but not erased. Shu leads you deeper into the Pantorium. Past racks of cargo pants, Wu called them pocket demons. Leather leggings, and even a pair of sequined bloomers someone apparently tried to smuggle in during a masquerade ball. You reach a circular dais in the center where a single spotlight illuminates a small display case. Inside is a chart, an official imperial pants classification matrix. You stifle a laugh. Wu really thought of everything. On the chart, Class 1, military trousers, forbidden. Class 2, decorative pants, discouraged. Class 3, winter leggings, conditionally allowed, only under robes, and only if the emperor doesn't see them. Class 4, symbolic pants, used for festivals, approval required. You step back, mind buzzing. What kind of ruler catalogs what he outlaws so thoroughly? Was it fear? Nostalgia? A weird kind of guilt? You don't know. But suddenly, it makes sense why Wu never had these garments destroyed. They weren't just articles of clothing. They were memories, mistakes, alternatives he couldn't face, but also couldn't let go. You turn to Shu. What happens if he finds out we were here? She shrugs. He already knows. You blink. Everyone knows, she continues. He lets us keep it, quietly, just not publicly. You think about that as you exit the Pantorium, stepping once more into the breezy upper halls of the palace where robes billow and silk whispers. It's not about pants, not really. It's about what we hide. Later that evening, you find yourself with Wu in the courtyard, watching clouds drift past the moon. He's silent for a long time. Then softly, "Did you know," he says, "that before the ban, I had trousers with embroidered cranes?" You say nothing. "They made me look powerful," he continues, "but I didn't feel free." Another pause. The robe is honesty. It moves. It admits the wind. You nod. He smiles. "But sometimes I remember the pockets." You both laugh quietly. No further explanation needed. The wind is howling tonight. You're standing on a jagged cliff at the edge of the imperial hunting grounds. Hair whipping across your face, robes snapping like sailcloth. Beside you, Emperor Wu is shouting at the sky. "Speak louder, wind!" It does. A sudden gust slams into both of you, nearly knocking you back. Wu only laughs, wide-eyed and unbothered, his golden robe flaring like a phoenix on fire. "I will answer." You're cold, confused, and clinging to a tree root. This is not what you thought an evening retreat meant. But to Wu, this is sacred ground. It's the cliff of Sky's ear, a wind-swept outcrop said to be touched by divine breath. According to legend, those who listen long enough might hear the voice of heaven. Most emperors visited once, maybe twice, for ceremonial purposes. Wu built a kite-launching platform. You're not joking. Right behind you is a structure made entirely of woven bamboo and silk ropes, shaped like a lotus flower. It's got an altar for incense, a small bench, and 3 differently sized wind chimes, one shaped like a deer. Wu stands near the edge now, holding what may be the largest kite you've ever seen. It's shaped like a bird. No. A bird made of clouds. The wings are layered in transparent silk. The tail stretches back almost 20 feet. He calls it the Whispering Soarer. It carries no messages, he says, only questions. Tonight, he intends to fly it as a prayer. You glance at the wind readings carved on a wooden slate. Current gusts? Dangerous. Very dangerous. Like this will tear your fancy silk robe off dangerous. But Wu's determined. I must hear the sky tonight, he says. It is time. You try to talk him out of it. He waves you off. The wind and I, we are old friends. He straps the kite's harness around his waist. Wait, he's attaching himself to it? You blink. Wait, you're flying it? Yourself? He nods, completely calm. Why should others be lifted when I remain earthbound? You don't have a great answer for that. Mostly because your brain is occupied by the image of the Emperor launching himself off a cliff like a misguided paper airplane. You try again. At least take a rope. But it's too late. He's already gesturing to the launch crew. Yes, he has a launch crew. Dressed in color-coded robes. One holds a gong. Another is massaging a goose for some reason. The gong sounds. Wu sprints, robe flying, silk wings catching the air. For a heartbeat, he lifts. He's flying, not far, not high, but enough to be off the ground, caught by the wind, suspended between gravity and madness. He whoops with joy, spinning slightly, arms outstretched. And then, a gust, too strong. The kite jerks. Wu lurches sideways. The silk groans. You brace yourself for disaster, but instead, he lands, hard, rolling, a splash of color against the wet grass below the cliff. You race down the path to find him sprawled out, laughing, hair full of leaves, one sandal missing. Did it speak? You ask, panting. He looks up at the clouds. Yes, he says softly. It said, not yet. You stare at him, he grins. Tomorrow, perhaps. Later that evening, as he's wrapped in warm towels and sipping ginger broth beside a brazier, he explains more. The wind has moods. You must be patient. You nod, trying not to let the worry show. You're starting to sense that these kites, these cliffs, this pursuit of flight, it's more than just obsession. It's yearning. Wu isn't just playing. He's searching for meaning, for absolution, for whatever truth lies just above the tallest tree. You ask him, were you hoping to fly away? He considers this. No, he says, only to rise, just for a moment, to see as the wind sees, then come back wiser. You don't tell anyone else what happened, not the full story. You say he tested a new kite design, that it almost worked. People nod. Kites are expected here. So is the occasional tumble. But as you walk back through the darkened palace halls, you carry the image with you. Wu, arms wide, eyes closed, laughing in midair. For a moment, untethered, historians are still debating whether the emperor truly believed he could fly, or whether he knew exactly what he was doing, chasing symbols instead of safety. You think maybe both. And when you lie down that night, wind still rustling in your ears, you whisper a quiet question into the dark. Did the sky answer? Or was it just laughing with him? You wake to whispers. Not the poetic kind you're used to around here. No metaphor about frogs or sky-colored regrets. These are hushed, urgent, cloak-pulled tight whispers, and they're everywhere. Something's changed. You sit up on your cushion. The halls are quieter than usual, the air tense and heavy, like it's holding its breath. Even the usually insistent doves in the garden of slightly philosophical birds are silent. A courier passes, fast. Too fast for robes. You see it. He's wearing pants. You blink. No one says anything about it. No parade of shame. No gong. No chicken hat. Just pants. Plain and utilitarian, like they're allowed again. You make your way to the outer courtyard. The banners have been taken down. The colors are muted. The musicians, usually warming up by now, are nowhere to be found. A servant is carefully folding up a giant kite. It's one of Wu's older designs, a silver hawk with embroidered lightning bolts. She sees you looking and shrugs. Storm's coming, but there's not a cloud in the sky. Then it hits you. This isn't about weather, it's about change. The empire is shifting. News trickles in over the morning. A new warlord, General Chen, has taken the southern provinces. His forces wear practical clothing. They march in straight lines. Their strategies involve maps and bridges, not poetry and decorative vegetables. He's not here to debate pants. You're in the Hall of Echoes by mid-morning, pressed against a column, watching as ministers whisper behind fans. Some still wear robes. Others have quietly transitioned to tunic trouser combos. The robe-only dress code isn't enforced today. Wu doesn't appear. Hours pass. No flute solos. No flying experiments. Not even a single mandatory moon watching. By late afternoon, it's confirmed. General Chen's envoys are approaching the capital. Not to negotiate, to replace. You find Wu alone in the sky chamber. He's dressed simply. No embroidery, no tassels. Still a robe, but thin, worn. You've never seen him look more grounded. He's standing by the window, kite scrolls rolled up beside him, untouched. "Did you hear?" he says without turning. You nod. Will they wear pants? You pause. Yes? He smiles a little. Good. Their knees will be warm. Silence stretches between you. Below, the city hums with uncertainty. Old banners are being removed. Tailors are already switching patterns. The wind feels different. I knew this day would come, Wu says. Nothing floats forever. He picks up a small kite from the table. It's shaped like a rabbit. You remember it, one of the early prototypes. It never flew well, but he kept it anyway. I tried to give them something lighter, he murmurs. A moment of air, of absurdity. Was that wrong? No, you say. He nods slowly, eyes distant. But now, the sky belongs to different dreams. That night, you walk the palace corridors one last time. Familiar tapestries are being taken down. The mural of the Emperor Kite Rider has been rolled away. In the training yards, military officials in crisp pants practice drills without a single dance step. The robe is fading. Wu spends his final official day in the courtyard, watching the sky. He doesn't speak much. He just stares upward, the wind stirring the edges of his robe. Ministers resign. New ones are appointed. Even the goat is replaced with a stern-looking mule named Discipline. Historians are still debating whether Wu was forced out or stepped aside, whether he lost power or simply let it go. What's clear is this: the No Pants Empire is over. And yet, even as the robes vanish, something lingers. In the eyes of the children who remember the flying fish kite. In the smiles of former ministers who still write poems on their lunch napkins. In the leftover scrolls fluttering in the corners of abandoned halls. Not everything floats forever, but some things fall gently. Like kites, like dreams, like silk, when the wind lets go. You climb the hill in silence. It's evening now, the light mellow and gold, casting soft shadows on the long grass. The city lies behind you, quieter than it's ever been. No parades, no kazoo trials, no cloud-shaped sedan chairs gliding past in slow-motion absurdity. The empire is moving on, one tunic at a time. At the top of the hill sits Emperor Wu, not in a throne, not even on a cushion, just on the earth. Legs crossed, hands resting on his knees, face turned to the sky. Beside him, the last kite. It's enormous, easily the largest he's ever built. It's shaped like a heron in flight, wingspan as wide as a house, made from white silk, so thin it glows in the fading light. Tied to the kite's belly is a small harness, just big enough for one man. Your breath catches. You walk quietly to his side. He doesn't look at you, but his voice is calm. You know, I almost outlawed chairs once, but someone tripped during the no seating ceremony, and I decided the symbolism was unclear. You smile. He's still Wu, even now. Behind you, distant drums begin to sound. Not from Wu's court. Those are gone. These are the arrival drums of the new government. Their notes are sharp, square, not improvised, not dream-shaped. You sit down beside him, robe catching on a wildflower. So, you ask softly, "You're really going to do it?" He nods. "I've been designing this one for years. The wind pattern is perfect. If I catch the current just right, I'll glide along the ridge, maybe even circle the lake." You glance at the slope ahead, the breeze rising steadily, tugging at the silk like an invitation. "And if it doesn't go right?" He shrugs. "Then I fall. That's the deal with the sky." You both sit for a while. Birds circle overhead. The lanterns in the city begin to flicker on, one by one, like stars remembering their cue. Wu finally rises. He adjusts the harness, checks the knots, pats the silk wing like it's a friend. Then he pauses, reaches into his robe, and pulls out a small, folded pair of pants. You blink. He holds them up. They're soft, simple, worn at the cuffs. "I kept one," he says. "Couldn't help it. They have sentimental knees." Then, in one smooth motion, he tucks them inside the kite, right into the chest cavity, like a secret offering. "For balance," he explains. You don't laugh. You just nod. He steps back, takes a breath, and waits. The wind lifts, the grass bends low, and then, with a run that starts slow and becomes certain, Emperor Wu launches himself and his giant kite off the edge of the hill. He lifts, not far, but enough. For a moment, the heron kite catches the breeze. It arcs across the sky, wings trembling, Wu's robes trailing behind like silver streamers. He stands inside it, leaning with the current, eyes wide open. From where you sit, it looks like he's flying. Just for a moment. And then, the wind shifts. The kite tilts, drops. Not a crash, not a tragedy. Just a slow spiral downward into the field beyond the ridge, where the grass is soft and the sky still welcomes all mistakes. You run to the ridge's edge, but when you get there, he's already sitting up, laughing. You both laugh. A few weeks later, the new regime will take full control. There will be rules, uniforms, sensible boots. But those who remember, they'll tell stories of the emperor who banned pants, who listened to dreams, who launched ministers like balloons, who made kites sing, and who, one quiet night, flew. So now, with the wind settling and the night deepening, you lie back in your own bed, robe wrapped, limbs warm, thoughts softening like silk and water. Let it all fade now. The scrolls, the shadows, the laughter in the marble halls. Let the images drift like distant kites above your head, gentle, impossible, slow. You imagine the sound of ribbons fluttering in the breeze, the feeling of silk brushing your fingertips, the distant warmth of a copper lantern glowing low. There's incense in the air, soft like memory. There's a voice whispering poetry without words. You are not walking anymore. You are floating, weightless, timeless. The world below disappears, and you rise with it, up past the trees, over the rooftops, higher than the pagoda where dreams were once law. You glide through a sky wide and slow, where nothing matters but how light you feel. No robes, no pants, just peace. Let your mind drift like a paper bird. Let go of the day, the thoughts, the tug of responsibility. Breathe in and out. Let sleep find you now, as soft as the emperor's laughter, as sure as the wind that always, always returns. You've reached the end of our tale.